Family Christmas turned ugly when my uncle gave my brother money and gave me advice I never asked. It happened in that split second after the paper tears and before everyone decides whether to laugh. We were all crammed into Mom and Dad's living room, the air too warm from the oven and the bodies, wrapping paper already everywhere like snow that couldn't melt. My uncle Greg sat back in an armchair like he owned it, one ankle on his knee, watching my brother Ethan peel tape off an envelope. Ethan pulled out a crisp stack of notes, real cash, thick enough that my cousin actually whistled, and Greg smiled like he'd just done something noble. "For the house deposit," he announced, loud enough for the kitchen to hear. "You're doing it right, mate. Proud of you." Everyone reacted instantly. Mom did that bright, "Oh, Greg," laugh. Dad clapped Ethan on the shoulder. The kids leaned forward because money is the only present they actually understand. I try to keep my face neutral because you're not supposed to look jealous at Christmas, but my stomach went tight anyway. Then Greg turned to me with a second envelope, lighter, thinner, and he tapped it against his palm like it was a lecture note. "And for you," he said, smiling, "I didn't want to just hand you cash and enable whatever's been going on. So I wrote you something, some advice. You'll thank me." The envelope felt like it weighed more than Ethan's money when it landed in my hands. It wasn't even sealed properly, like he wanted me to open it right there, on display. My fingers were cold, even though the room was hot. Oh, I managed because everyone was looking at me now, waiting for the grateful reaction. Greg nodded encouragingly. "Go on," he said. "Read it." Mom's eyes flicked to me with that warning look she uses when she's afraid I'll make the moment awkward. Dad had already turned back to Ethan, asking questions about the deposit, like he was interviewing him for a promotion. Ethan sat there with the money still in his hands, looking uncomfortable in a way that almost made me angry, because he always looks uncomfortable when something good happens to him at my expense, and then he still takes it. I slid my thumb under the flap and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Greg's handwriting was thick and confident, like he thought every word was a gift. The first line jumped out. "You're smart, but you need discipline." My throat went tight, so fast I tasted metal. I felt my cheeks burn. The kids shrieked over a new toy somewhere behind me, and the sound cut through my head like static. Greg's voice was still warm when he said, "Just some tough love. You need it." It was Christmas Day, and we were doing the presents after lunch thing Mom insists on, because she likes to take photos first while everyone still looks put together. That's the official reason. The real reason is she can't stand the idea of people opening gifts without her supervising the reactions. Like she's a director, and this is her production. We've done Christmas at Mom and Dad for as long as I can remember. Same cheap plastic tree that leans slightly to the left, same playlist of carols, same ham glazed with too much honey, same fight over who forgot the crackers. The family has grown, people have married in and out, kids have been added, but the roles stay weirdly fixed. Ethan is the success story. Chloe is the organizer. Mom is the peacekeeper. Dad is the judge who pretends he's neutral. And I'm the one they worry about, the one they talk around, the one who always ends up as a lesson in someone else's story. This year I promised myself I'd keep it simple. Show up. Bring dessert. Smile. Don't overshare. Don't react. I'd had a rough 12 months. Burnout, a job change that didn't go smoothly, the kind of anxiety that makes your body feel like it's constantly bracing for impact. I've been doing therapy, the unglamorous kind, where you learn how to breathe properly and stop apologizing for taking up space. I'd also stop pretending things didn't hurt just because my family finds feelings embarrassing. That's probably why Greg decided I needed discipline. In their minds, if you're struggling, it's because you're not trying hard enough. If you say you're struggling out loud, it's because you want attention. Greg has always loved Ethan. It's not subtle. Greg calls him mate in that proud, affectionate way he never uses with me. Greg is Dad's older brother, the one who acts like he's the family standards officer. He's the guy who thinks a man's worth is his mortgage and a woman's worth is how easy she is to manage. He's also the kind of person who donates to charity and makes sure someone films it. Last year, he told everyone at Christmas that Ethan was the future and that I was still finding myself, like I was a teenager with a gap year, Not someone in my late 20s who's been paying rent and bills and showing up to family obligations for years. I laughed it off then because there were kids around and Mom had that look. But something about being handed advice in an envelope while my brother got a stack of money snapped something in me. I didn't read it out loud. I couldn't. My eyes ran over the lines anyway because my brain is stupid and curious even when it's in pain. Greg had written bullet points. Actual bullet points. Stop blaming anxiety for everything. Commit to one path. Get up early. Be grateful. Stop being so sensitive. Don't make your mother's life harder. The last one made my stomach drop like I'd missed a step on stairs. I looked up from the page and met Mom's eyes. She was staring at the tree, jaw tight, like she could will the situation to stay festive. I waited for her to say something, anything, that suggested she didn't agree with the premise that I exist to make her life difficult. She didn't. She just said, too brightly, "Isn't that thoughtful?" Like she was describing a scented candle. Greg leaned forward, smiling like he'd done community service. "I know you don't like hearing it," he said, "but someone has to say it. We're family. We tell the truth." He gestured vaguely at the paper in my hand. "You've had time to muck around. Ethan's doing it properly. This is your year to get serious." I felt my hand start to shake, and I hated that my body always betrays me first. I folded the paper back into the envelope slowly, carefully, like if I moved too fast, I'd spill something all over the carpet. "Thanks," I said, and my voice came out flat. Greg's smile faltered for half a second because he wanted gratitude, not neutrality. "Come on," he said, chuckling. "Don't be like that. I'm trying to help you." Ethan finally spoke, voice low. "Uncle Greg," he said, "we didn't have to." Greg waved him off. "It's fine," he said. "He can handle it. He's got a spine." It's good for her to hear some hard truths. The her hit me in a weird way, like he decided my identity in that moment was problem. I looked at Dad. Dad didn't look at me. He was still talking about interest rates with Ethan, eyes bright like this was the only conversation that mattered. Chloe, sitting on the floor near the kids with her phone in her hand, watched me over the top of a wrapping paper pile with this small, knowing smirk, like she was thinking, "Don't you dare ruin Mom's Christmas." And that's what it always comes back to. Mom's Christmas. Mom's peace. Mom's image of a happy family. I tried one more time to make it manageable. "If you wanted to help," I said, keeping my voice steady, "you could have just asked how I'm doing." Greg laughed. He actually laughed, like I'd said something naive. "I know how you're doing," he said. "You're stuck. You've always been stuck. And you keep making excuses. Anxiety, feelings, boundaries." He said the last word with a little air quote motion, like it was a TikTok trend. "At some point, you just have to grow up." My throat burned. "I have grown up," I said quietly. "I pay my own bills. I work. I'm here. I show up." Greg's eyebrows lifted like he was surprised I'd spoken back. "Showing up isn't the same as building a life," he said. "Ethan is building a life." Mom made a small sound, like she was about to intervene, then didn't. Dad still didn't look at me. Chloe's smirk widened. Something in me went strangely calm, the way it does right before I do something irreversible. "So I'm the example," I said softly. "Ethan gets money, and I get a warning label." Greg's face tightened. "Don't twist it," he snapped, the warmth gone. "I'm not calling you a warning label. You literally wrote 'Stop making your mother's life harder,'" I said, and my voice shook on Mother because it hurt that he'd put Mom in there like a weapon. "Do you think I'm here trying to make her life hard?" Mom's head snapped up. "Oh my God," she whispered, panicked. "Please, not today." That sentence landed harder than Greg's advice. Not today. Not ever. Not where people can see. Not where she has to choose. I stood up because sitting felt like being pinned. My knees were wobbly. The room tilted slightly, not from dizziness exactly, more like my body was deciding whether it was safe. "Mom," I said, and my voice cracked, which made me want to disappear. "Do you agree with him?" Mom's eyes filled with tears instantly. Not the kind that say, "I'm sorry I let this happen," but the kind that say, "Why are you doing this to me?" "I just want a nice Christmas," she whispered. Dad finally looked up, annoyed. "What is this?" he demanded. "Why are we doing this?" I stared at him. Because he just handed Ethan cash and handed me a list of reasons I'm a disappointment, I said. My voice was louder now, carrying. The kids had gone quiet in that eerie way children do when they sense adult tension. Someone's toddler made a small whining sound and then stopped. Greg stood too, puffing up, offended at being questioned. "Don't be dramatic," he said. "I am helping." "Helping would be treating me like a person," I said, and the words came out sharper than I intended. "Not a project, not a lesson, not a problem." Chloe's eyes narrowed. "Can you stop?" she hissed, quiet but intense. "You're upsetting Mom." There it was. Not that was cruel. Not Greg, apologize. Just stop. Don't ruin the mood. Don't make people feel weird. Ethan stood up awkwardly, still holding the money like it was radioactive. "I don't want it," he blurted, and everyone turned to him like he'd slapped someone. Ethan's face was red. I didn't ask for, "This is weird." Greg looked stunned, then angry. "Don't be ungrateful," he snapped. Ethan swallowed. He looked at me for the first time all afternoon, properly. "It's not fair," he said quietly. "It's not fair to do it like this." My chest tightened. I didn't know whether to feel relief or rage. Ethan saying something didn't erase the fact that he'd been benefiting from the dynamic forever. But it didn't matter. It cracked the script. Mom's face crumpled. "Ethan, please," she whispered. "Just please." Dad rubbed his forehead like this was all a headache happening to him. "Greg," he said, finally, maybe it wasn't the time. Greg's eyes flashed. "So now I'm the bad guy," he barked. "I try to help, and I'm the bad guy." I wanted to laugh. I didn't. I just felt tired down to my bones. "No one's making you the bad guy," I said, voice low. "You did something hurtful and called it help." Greg scoffed, shaking his head, and then he did the thing people like him always do when they lose control of the narrative. He turned it into a moral judgment. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," he said, pointing at me like I was evidence. "Look how she reacts. Look how she makes everything negative. This is why people walk on eggshells." Mom made a small sobbing sound, and Chloe immediately went to her, arm around her shoulders, glaring at me like I'd struck her. Dad stood there stiffly, torn between defending his brother and ending the discomfort. Ethan looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. I looked around the room and realized something with this weird, sick clarity. The holiday didn't turn ugly because I spoke. It was ugly already. Speaking just made it visible. I took a slow breath. My hands were shaking again, but I didn't hide them. "I'm going to go," I said quietly. Mom's head snapped up. "Don't," she whispered, frantic. "Don't leave. Not like this." "Like what?" I asked, and I hated that my voice sounded so broken. Like someone who's tired of being humiliated with a smile. Dad's jaw clenched. "If you leave, don't come back acting like we owe you an apology," he said, and his tone was cold in that way that makes you feel 12 again. I looked at him, and something in me finally stopped begging. "You don't owe me anything," I said softly. "But I'm not staying." Ethan took a step toward me. "I'll come with," he started. Mom made a sharp sound. "No," she said instantly. "Ethan, stay. Please." Ethan froze, trapped by her voice like he always has been. He looked at me helplessly. "I'm sorry," he mouthed. I grabbed my bag from the chair and walked to the hallway, past the coat hooks, past the framed family photos where everyone looks happy and I look like I'm trying. My hands were trembling so hard I fumbled my shoes. I heard Greg behind me, still talking, still defending himself. I heard Chloe murmuring to Mom, soothing her. I heard Dad sighing heavily like the victim of an inconvenience. I heard the kids start whispering again, confused. Outside, the air was cold enough to sting my cheeks. I sat in my car with my hands on the steering wheel and stared at the house for a full minute before I could move. The lights in the windows looked warm and soft. From the outside, it looked like a perfect Christmas. My phone buzzed before I even started the engine. "Mom, why do you always do this?" "Chloe, you couldn't just let it go for one day." "Dad, nothing, of course." "Ethan, I'm sorry." I didn't know he was going to do that. I didn't want it. I stared at Ethan's message until my vision blurred. I believed him, and it still didn't fix the ache because the bigger problem wasn't Greg. It was the way everyone else treated Greg's cruelty like weather. Unpleasant, unavoidable, not worth fighting. I drove home with the radio off because I couldn't handle anyone else's voice. When I got to my apartment, I sat on the floor in the hallway, still wearing my coat, and cried the kind of quiet, exhausted cry that feels like your body wringing out poison. I kept thinking about the paper in my bag, the bullet points, the line about Mom, the way Greg had smiled while he handed it to me, like humiliation is acceptable as long as you call it love. Later that night, Ethan called. His voice was low, guilty. He's always been like that, he said, as if that explained anything. I didn't know he was going to do it publicly. You didn't stop it, I said, and I didn't say it to be cruel. I said it because it was true. There was a long silence. Then Ethan said, I know. He told me something I didn't expect, that the money made him feel sick, that Greg had been texting him for weeks about getting serious and being a man, that Dad had known about the money and told Ethan not to mention it to me because you'd take it the wrong way. Ethan's voice cracked when he said that, like he hated the sentence. I should have told you, he said. I didn't want to deal with the blow-up. I stared at the wall and felt something hollow inside me settle into place. So everyone planned it, I said softly, and the plan was that I wouldn't react. I'm sorry, Ethan whispered. After we hung up, I took Greg's envelope out of my bag. My fingers shook as I unfolded the paper again. It looked so ridiculous on my kitchen counter. This serious list from a man who barely knows my life. I thought about ripping it up. I didn't. I put it in a drawer, not because I wanted to keep it, but because part of me needed proof it happened. Because that's what my family does best. They rewrite, they soften, they claim it was a joke, they tell you you're twisting it. The next morning, Dad texted, "You upset your mother. Greg was trying to help. You need to learn to take feedback." Feedback, like I was an employee under review. I didn't reply. I just sat there with my coffee going cold, thinking about how hard I'd worked to be easy this year. How many times I'd swallowed something sharp to keep things smooth. How I'd shown up early, brought dessert, smiled in photos. And still, when it came down to it, I was the one given advice instead of generosity. The one treated like a project while my brother was celebrated. I keep turning it over in my head, try to find the version where I'm overreacting, because that's the script I grew up with. If you're hurt, you're dramatic. If you're angry, you're ungrateful. If you leave, you're selfish. But I can't unsee Mom's face when I asked if she agreed. How she didn't say no. How she just begged me not to ruin Christmas. I can't unhear Greg saying I'd thank him. I can't unfeel the weight of that paper in my hands while everyone else clapped for Ethan's deposit. And the thing that scares me is how clear everything feels now. Like a fog lifted. It wasn't one bad moment. It was a summary. Ethan is the investment. I'm the caution. In their heads, that makes sense. It keeps the family story tidy. So now I'm sitting here wondering what next Christmas looks like. If I go, I know I'll be expected to pretend this never happened. Mom will want photos. Dad will want peace. Chloe will want me quiet. Greg will want his tough love applauded. If I don't go, they'll call me dramatic and say I'm abandoning the family. I don't know what I'll choose yet. I just know that for the first time in my life, the idea of not being there doesn't feel like punishment. It feels like relief.